Last week, the Furious 7 broke a global record by becoming the first movie to get to $1 billion in less than 2 weeks. As of Sunday, it had grossed $1.25 billion and is the 7th biggest film ever. The franchise, including its video games, film shorts, and soundtracks, without any planning, has the kind of expanded universe that Hollywood now craves. Because the Fast and Furious media capitalizes on the studio's subsidiaries, divisions, and joint ventures, which in reality are a global, horizontally integrated entertainment conglomerate that holds interests across a range of what were once distinct media segments. And this synergy reflects the economics of the ongoing media consolidation that we've seen in the last 3 decades. And now it even includes GameCon, which I was surprised to learn. A media conglomerate has an incentive to franchise across as many of these different media platforms as possible. And the studios are really like a giant self-licking ice cream cone. They develop and produce their own IP. They publish their comics in advance of the movies coming out. They market them on their websites. They distribute them on their cable networks, and they review them in their print media. And they generate a long tail of revenue with their video games and theme park rides, which is usually profitable but often forgettable. If you contrast the Fast and the Furious with the Matrix franchise, you'll recall that the Wachowskis had the same pressure to actualize across all these verticals. But because they had created the franchise, they had control of the media and designed them to work together in a new way. Filling in the gaps between the first and the second movies, the brothers created the Animatrix, a direct-to-video anthology of 9 shorts that tell the backstory of the war with the machines. And in one, the final fight of the Osiris, a hovercraft captain learns that the machines are drilling to Zion. And the crew and the characters, a character named Jew here, sacrifice themselves to get a warning letter in the mail. And if you played the video game, you knew that letter set up the prologue for Enter the Matrix, in which you could play as Ghost or Niobe, and the object of the game was to retrieve the letter and deliver it to Morpheus. And then if you saw the movie, in the first act, there's a scene where Niobe calls the captains of the hover ships together, and you don't need to, and warns them that the machines are drilling to Zion. And you don't need to see or play all 3 of these things, but if you did, you had this aha moment that transmedia designers call additive comprehension. And note this is all very different from what's called platforming, which we tell the same story over and over again in various media. It's predictable and runs the risk of overexposing the IP. The Wachowskis are fanboys and girls, and they understand our relationship with media is shifting now, that viewing and playing and reading habits are changing. In this convergence culture, transmedia is the ascendant media. Transmedia is a term coined by Henry Jenkins in his book, Convergence Culture. It captures the idea for contiguous storytelling where integral elements of fiction get systematically dispersed across multiple delivery channels to create a unified and coordinated entertainment experience, with each medium taking on its own unique contribution to the unfolding story. When we launched this mech shooter Hawken, a globally distributed free-to-play PC game, we decided we would work with an inbound marketing strategy, and we'd use high engagement creative collateral in the form of transmedia to acquire our customers. Comics, collectibles, a web series, trading card games, and novels were all designed. And they would all be entry points for fans to be able to discover and play Hawken. Hawken set in a unique future where runaway nanomachines have infected a planet and are slowly growing over everything. It's a complex world, and it's difficult to explain in a single log line that's well suited to transmedia, because transmedia is not based on individual characters or plots, but rather complex fictional worlds which can sustain multiple interrelated characters and their stories. The process of world building encourages an encyclopedic impulse in both fans and designers. We're drawn to master what we can know about a world which always expands before our grasp. And note, this is a very different pleasure that we associate with the closure found in most large media and classically constructed narratives, where we expect to finish the game or leave the theater knowing everything there is to know about that story. But if you love Game of Thrones, you know what I'm talking about here when I say encyclopedic impulse. Because transmedia storytelling requires a high degree of coordination, it works best either in independent projects like Hawken, where the same artists shape the story across all media, or in projects where there's strong collaboration or co-creation is encouraged. Most franchises are governed by licensing, where the story originates in one media and subsequent media are subordinate. But transmedia can't work that way. When you're doing transmedia design, you have a concentrated effort to avoid fractures and schisms. Effort is across your company and your design team with third parties and licensees. Everyone needs to obey the canon that you created in your design. Because when you don't, the fanboys will let you know about it, which is entirely reasonable if they're going to embrace it. Transmedia is the ideal aesthetic for an era of social media sharing and collective intelligence. Best practices in social provide a set of roles and goals rather than simply dispersing information, which fans can assume and construct with their own stories about characters or costumes, which invite us to immerse ourselves in the world, like this cosplayer. The encyclopedic ambitions of transmedia design are often result in what might seem as excesses or gaps in the unfolding story. That is, they introduce potential plots which cannot be fully told, or extra details which hint at more than can be revealed. Kind of like the origami unicorn in Blade Runner. Fans have a strong incentive to continue to elaborate on these story elements, working over through their speculation until they take on a life of their own. Fan fiction can be seen as an expansion of the franchises in new directions, which reflect the fans' desire to fill in the gaps they've discovered. Transmedia designs expand the potential for market for a property by creating different entry points for different audience segments. We gave away a series of digital comics on Comixology, and they included a registration code worth $20. When we compared our player cohorts to identical codes given away on gaming sites like GameFly, we found the players acquired with the comics were qualitatively superior. They registered in greater numbers, they stayed around longer, and they spent more money. And even though we produced the comics at our own cost, the cost to acquire those players was much less than the referral fees that we paid to the websites. Finally, we designed transmedia stories to take advantage of unique platform-specific strengths in each media. For example, if you're going to blow up a planet in your story, it's a lot cheaper to do that in a comic book than it is in an IMAX movie. Games are for doing, movies are for showing, novels are for telling. It's easy to say, but very hard to do, but that's what makes it so much fun to design. We're going to show you now a live-action trailer that was the injection media that we launched Hawken with. It's directed by Jerry O'Flaherty, who was the art director on Gears of War and now is at Riot. And it's unique in that it mixes Unreal game engine assets with live action, so it's a true game live action combination.
What motivates the best pilots? The siren wants a little revenge. The new kid wants to prove he's got the goods. The baldhead is looking to be a legend. The renegade wants to save the planet. Everything is on the line for this mission.
It's kidnapping.
Yeah, she looks familiar.
They took her because she knows how to reverse the Hawken virus.
Here comes the big guns, baby.
The trailer debuted on Machinima with a registration link direct to our website, and it was produced for about $50,000 US. We acquired about 165,000 players in 24 hours. Now that's 30 cents a player, which compared to the average acquisition cost today of about $2 to $3 is highly effective. And I think demonstrating that players respond best when we engage them with high engagement, creative collateral like Transmedia. Thank you for inviting me. About 5 minutes if anybody had any questions about transmedia design. I can tell you that it may seem overly ambitious, especially to mobile designers and creators, to be thinking about all these media, including feature film, but it's really just planning for success. And if you have any ambitions in these areas, I can tell you after setting up graphic novels, games, and independent screenplays, will give you the most leverage with a Hollywood studio. So normally if you take a video game to a studio, their business affairs will demand all rights for everything else in perpetuity. But they'll view this design Bible, which are often about 300 pages long and sometimes about 20,000 to 100,000 words in length, as development, and they will have to pay for that development. So instead of getting all the rights for a single purchase option fee, they'll have to purchase the individual rights that you've developed previously. Yep. The best way to work is like the George R.R. Martin scheme, where you have one creative visionary. Now, Martin doesn't write or produce the successful TV series or any of the video games or other media, but he certainly oversees it. So the best practices we see is you have a visionary who loves and believes in this world and understands its characters, and then you work with a small team. Usually when I work on transmedia designs, there's one person on the team that's expert in each one of the categories that we want to design for. And they will fight for the best version of that. A lot of us have been designing games for a long time. We've seen people with kind of movie-like ambitions for story and games, and that turned into a runaway process. the game designer wants to fight for doing things and what's cool to do in this video game. And in the other narrative-based media, you have designers that will fight for the best version of a novel or a comic, that kind of thing. If you're interested in getting in touch with people that do that kind of design, please see me afterwards, and I'd be happy to introduce them to you. Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because I'm a father of 7 9-year-old boys, and kind of below 10, you still have these like hyperactive imaginations where why can't you have a robot dinosaur? They love to mix genres, and yeah, I get a ton of inspiration from them. It's important to listen to any of your audience as you design millennials, kids, older, hardcore players. They should be part of your team. For myself, I'm usually designing for myself. I just design what I'm interested in and try and get everybody else excited about my ideas. Any other questions? Okay, thanks again for having me.